You're someone with a vision for your practice, for your side hustle, and for your personal journey. But when it comes to establishing your path on how to get to where you want to be with your practice, things get a little messy. You're also someone who'd prefer to go in person instead of to groups and listening to everyone else's story. To me, it sounds like you could benefit from one on one consulting with our experienced practice of the practice consultants. From $5.95 a month and up, you can work with a consultant that will give you more direction and practical, tried and tested tips matched to you and your goals. For more information, visit practiceofthepractice.com/apply. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/apply. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 976. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast, where we are here 3 days a week, every single week, and sometimes we even do 4 episodes a week, depending on what's going on. And we're helping you build a thriving practice you absolutely love. You know, whether you're just getting started and you don't know up from down and you're trying to figure it out, or you're ready to sell your practice, we have so many resources for you, free, paid, all of it. If you're ever confused, just head on over to Practice of the Practice. We have a chat function where we literally answer your questions. Like, we're just there hanging out. If you're not sure what to do next, go ask a question. We'll point you in the right direction for resources. We have a ton of free checklists and opt-ins and calculators for every phase of practice. And we also have membership communities from that moment you want to start a practice. For solo practice, that's next level practice. Then we have group practice launch, group practice boss, and audience building academy. So we're with you all the way through, and we want to make it easier. Something I often say is that we are past the age of information. You can get information anywhere, but we are in the age of implementation. We want to help you implement faster to get this practice off the ground and rolling, and to serve your community. If you're spending 6 or 12 months launching, that's just way too long. That's 12 months that you could have been helping people out, making money, and feeling really fulfilled in that. So really excited about our guest today, who's Yolanda Harper. And Yolanda and I first met at the very first Slowdown School, the Slowdown School that I hosted here on the beaches of northern Michigan, where we slowed down and then we really worked on their practices the second half. Yolanda's a warm-hearted music and nature lover who has a strong faith and likes #trail life. She's real. She's a therapist, mental health thought leader, entrepreneur, TEDx speaker, and Soul Sabbatical doula. She's also the author of Soul Sabbatical. She's a wife, a mom to her grown kids, and a human first. Yolanda, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Hi, Joe. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about our conversation today.
Yeah, it's funny how there's people that kind of pop in and out of
Yeah.
different social media feeds and your life, and I always love when there's people that I met way back when, like when I was doing
hmm
Slowdown School and seeing what you're doing.
hmm
And I'm still friends with Jeremy Sharp, who came to that
Yep.
first Slowdown School, and John
Yep.
Clark, and even Jeremy and I, we hung out when we were on our road trip and lived in Fort Collins for a month. So to
Yeah.
reconnect with you and to have watched your journey over the years has been really incredible. We're talking kind of sabbatical and some things that kind of happened in your life and around burnout and stress and things like that. I want to just start with, give me a picture of your life before you recognized you needed some help around burnout and some help around maybe taking a sabbatical. What did things look like?
Ooh. So think 2021, think coming off the heels of COVID. Think the way that there have been so many big shifts in the mental health space. Um, my husband and I run a group practice in the Tampa, Florida area. And just the culmination of trying to keep a practice open during COVID and making shifts and pivots and all of that kind of stuff. Um, I was feeling underwater. And I was at a point where I would come up for just like a gasp of air before kind of going right back down into the weeds. And there was a one particular moment when my husband and I we enjoy camping, and we were camping in the beautiful panhandle of Florida. And I remember stepping on the beach, and I remember thinking, "Oh my God, I can breathe," which on the one hand is a really great feeling until I realized the very next second that I didn't realize that I hadn't been breathing. So that was kind of
Mm.
startling to me.
Yeah, just that kind of shallow, stressed out breathing that gets you
Mhm.
by, but isn't what your body actually needs.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and a good
Yeah.
good thing there wasn't any red tide going on at that time. I
Yeah.
just learned about red tide a year ago. I was
Oh
down
my
with my
goodness.
partner visiting her brother who lives in the Tampa area,
Yeah.
and we went to the beach and they got out of the car and
Ah,
like, oh no, there's red
no.
tide. I'm like, what is that? And within a
Yes.
second, my
You
lungs
knew.
were burning.
You knew. Yeah. Yeah.
So you recognize that you've got some lack of breathing going on. Would you
Yeah.
have framed it as burnout at that point, or was it just kind of the very beginning of recognizing it?
It was the very beginning of recognizing it. I think along for quite a few years, I would joke about wanting to take a sabbatical, and because to me that sounded like a fancy way of saying I need some time off and a vacation, and like without saying that I need some time off and a vacation. But that moment in and of itself was an eye opener for me specifically. And I remember thinking at the moment, okay, just hold on, which is kind of what I had been doing. Just hold on for the next thing, right? So the next thing was we were getting ready to go on a business retreat, lots of hiking mixed in with, doing work on the business. I was like, I will take a closer look at this then. And so I got to that business retreat. I sat down in some quiet to do a journaling exercise that I do regularly about what my ideal day is. And I remember completing that journal entry and just kind of breaking down, sobbing, realizing that what I had written was not what my life was. And so I
Mm.
basically sobbed off and on for the rest of the week during that business retreat with the realization like I can keep trying to push the way that I've been pushing and like to the point of complete unraveling. But I'm one of those people that once I start noticing patterns for myself, I kind of take a look and say, well, you know what, Yolanda, you're the only one that can do anything about this. So what are you going to do?
Mm. Now, like what did your week kind of look like? We don't have to go through minute by minute, but just like,
Yeah.
what time were you waking up? What time were you going to bed? How much were you working? Like what
Yeah.
was the biggest stressors? Like what did your typical week look like?
Yeah, at the time, I was managing employees, supervising clinical lead at the practice. I was solely doing 2-day intensives at the time. So I do 2-day couples intensives and 2-day individual trauma intensives. And so that was kind of my clinical day. I was waking up at probably, 7 o'clock in the morning, having a little bit of a morning routine, but not as nailed down as it has become. Like my routine has definitely shifted between that time and this time. But really, I was holding on. You start your practice, you're bootstrapping it, you're doing all the things, and as you grow, like there wasn't a conscious effort for me um, to release and let go of some of the things that I had been doing. And it was just like ridiculous little things like putting bubblies in the refrigerator.
Mhm.
So a lot of like little things like that were on my plate and weighing me down.
Yeah. So you start to recognize this, it starts to build. How does it go from that to then starting to label it burnout and then recognizing you
Mhm.
actually needed a sabbatical and weren't just joking around?
Yeah, yeah. I think I started to become more and more aware of the toll of the work. I think one of the things that contributes to burnout is, for me at least, was like, this is what I do and this is what I'm good at. And I was put on this earth to serve, and all of those things are true. I'm a trauma therapist. And so so that's heavy work. And so I think part of it was recognizing that. Some personal things have been going on. I was going through significant grief from losing my father-in-law, who was a really important person to me. And so, that having that time and space during that business retreat and being surrounded by the people who were there with me um, helped me to kind of put a label a little bit more on some of these things, helped me to put words around what I was feeling, and really kind of gave me permission to use the word burnout because I think um, a lot of us can have a lot of shame around that word. If I'm a good therapist, if I am really called to do this work, then it's not going to take a toll on me, and it won't lead to burnout.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point that I want to underline that,
Hmm.
if you're going to be a therapist, we have to do everything we can to not burn out. And for our own health, for the example to our clients, for the longevity. I mean, you think about if you had, quit therapy because you're burned
Hmm.
out, and you could have had, another 10, 20, 30 years, depending on how long you want to work.
Right,
That's, 20 or 30 years of people not being served.
right.
And let alone, just being a human that gets to create your own job. If you're creating a business that you hate, like it's only your own fault. So it's one of
Exactly.
those things where it's great that you stepped back. Now, I mean, in a lot of ways, like I'm thinking about then, like, what kind of planning goes into a sabbatical? Like, how did you
Uh-huh.
decide on the length of time? How did you look at your finances? And,
Right.
I'd love for you to also just, speak to, I mean, I'm a single dad. Have
Hmm.
95% custody. Like,
Hmm.
what would that even look like for, someone like that? Or, is that even possible? Or do you really need to have a partner that can help? And so just talking through all those different
Right.
nuances of the planning side before we get into what it actually looked like.
Yeah, absolutely. So that business retreat where that realization landed, that happened in May, and I went on sabbatical in October. So from May to October, I was taking a much closer look at what are the things that I'm doing? How do we solidify some policies and procedures and things to, so that I can step back from these roles, who's going to step in for supervision for me for the clinical direction, um, for other tasks that I was doing at the time. The financial piece. Let's take a closer look at that. How do we make some adjustments? How do we plan for that? And we our kids are older and we are empty nesters now. So that piece wasn't as much of a factor for me in planning my sabbatical. But absolutely, that period of time gave me the opportunity to take a closer look at what needed to be put into place for me to be able to take a step back.
Hmm. Now, for someone that does have kids in their house, what do you
Yeah.
think a sabbatical would look like, in that situation?
Yeah. So for someone who does have kids in the house, I spent the majority of my sabbatical at home. And I was still a wife and mom. So it could be the same if you have younger kids in the house. Like, what are the tasks or what are the things that I'm doing with the kids? How are there ways for me to offload some of these tasks to have friends or family kind of step in to help with transport back and forth to school or activities or to help with homework, or can I pre-plan meals and stuff and put some in the freezer, like those kinds of things. So yeah, it is taking a look to see like how what needs to be put in place between now and the time that I'm going to step back that will make the stepping back, that will give me the time and space that I need in the stepping back.
Hmm. So it sounds like kinda first phase was really realizing you needed a sabbatical, you were burning out, the journaling, the
Hmm.
tears, all of that. Kinda the next
Hmm.
phase was looking at more the
Hmm.
logistics, like the money side of it, the, things that you're
Yeah.
responsible for in the practice, walking through just, like, policies and procedures. And then it's sort of entering into that sabbatical. What, as you entered in, how did you think through your intention for it? How did you think
Hmm.
through how you were going to spend that time? How did you decide how long it was going to be? Like, how did you sort
Yeah.
through kind of the framework of what the sabbatical actually would be?
Yeah. That's a great question. So, as far as like the length of the sabbatical, I was actually doing some coaching at the time with Kelly, and Kelly was like, "Okay, so if you're going to do this, then this needs to be more than just like a weeks long vacation." So she suggested a month out of the business side of the practice and 3 months away from seeing clients. And
Mm,
when she said that, my jaw dropped and like my heart like raised into my throat. I was like, there is no way that I can do that. So I had to take a look at. I did have a couple of weekly clients. Like, what did that look like? I was going to need to find care for them. Um, and then, after I came to really what I thought was, if I'm going to do this, I need to give it the best shot for it to be quote unquote successful. Like, what is my definition of a successful sabbatical? And I already knew that my typical pattern was taking 3 or 4 days off, or having some time off coincide with something work related. And I already knew that that wasn't working. Um, I kind of just got honest with myself and said, if you're going to do this, then do it. Just jump in. It's scary as heck, but jump into doing it. Um, then after I recognized the time frame, I started thinking about one a way for me to completely have some space, some physical space, that would lead to like mental and emotional space, away from home, away from work, the office, like all things. So I planned a hiking trip out to Washington State for the first week of my sabbatical, so that I could give myself that space. Then I started thinking, like, how do I want to, instead of what am I going to do, how do I want to feel on the other side of this time off? How was I feeling? And then how did I want to feel? So I was feeling overwhelmed and, anxious, and like really a lot of the way that the burnout was showing up in my life was the impact on my relationships. So, with my most cherished relationships, with my with my husband, and my partner and my kids, like I was really irritable and grumpy and just exhausted. And I was like, that's just not okay. So I wanted to find peace. I wanted to find some ease. I wanted to find a better sense of connection with myself, so that I didn't keep getting into these cycles that I was just kind of spinning my wheels, because I thought that the thing that I was doing was the next thing to do.
hmm
So one of the mhm.
No, no, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so one of the questions that I started asking myself was, why am I doing what I'm doing? Um, yeah,
Yeah. Now, were there certain either activities or
yeah,
habits that you inserted? Because I know, like, I'm thinking about myself. When I've taken long amounts of time off, um, and I think that's really healthy, because I think there's just basic business systems that we're stuck in the middle of that we don't need to be in, and we can talk about kind of
right.
the beneficial side of the other side of this in a minute. But
Yeah, yeah.
my tendency is to have a harder time slowing down. Even though I put on slow
Mhm.
down school, I need that as
Yeah,
much as anybody else does.
sure. Yeah.
And so I've found that in life, and especially time away, if I can say, okay, this is what I'm going to commit to doing every day, like
Uh-huh.
watercolor painting, for example.
Yeah.
So for a while, even, as I'm working, not taking a sabbatical, to view even my evenings as, somewhat of a
Mhm.
sabbatical rejuvenation. And so, okay,
Yeah,
for a couple of weeks, I'm going to just do a watercolor painting every single day. Doesn't matter if it
yeah,
turns out well, if I think it looks like trash, like it's just the habit of doing something that isn't work related, but that also brings me a lot of joy. For me,
yeah.
improv is also that. Every
Uh-huh.
Tuesday I do that for 2.5 hours. This week we had a show on Sunday. Monday. We did 2.5 hours of improv on Tuesday night practicing, did 2 hours last night on Wednesday. And then, we were having an improv party on Saturday. It's like improv week. But like that
Yeah.
brings me a lot of joy. And so like for
Yes.
you,
Yeah.
what were some of those, or did you have
Yeah.
any habits or things you put in? And if you did, like how did you structure those habits or things like that?
Yeah. So I started with how do I want to feel? And then I made a list of the activities that helped me to feel that way. And so I, so when I was with myself during that sabbatical time, I knew that there was going to be a draw to work. I knew that there, or even just pick up projects or do think tasks around the house. And I wanted to make sure that I had a solid list of activities that I could turn to that were rejuvenating, restoring, creative. I knew that creativity was a big part of my burnout, or lack of creativity was a part of my burnout. So I wanted to explore different creative elements, and in fact, took my first improv class. I was thinking of you as you were saying that. So and I loved it. It was fantastic. So anytime I had this draw to do something quote unquote productive or work related or even a task around the house, I would take a look at that list of activities and pull something from that activity or from that list. And then I also had just people that would help me to be accountable for that. So if I was really struggling and really like, oh, I want to check my email, I have this like desire to check my email, that I could reach out to one of those people and they would help me to, stay true to my soul sabbatical commitment. And from those practices, I describe the sabbatical as a soul sabbatical because it was really such a deep reconnection to myself at a level that I hadn't experienced before. And so I say that the sabbatical was an event, but it's an ongoing practice because those are things that I have carried forward into my life. I have, during that time, I put a different morning routine into place, one that was a little bit more slow, and time to meditate and journal and work out and do those things before, stepping into work. I was much more solid about not wavering from that after the sabbatical. So that was the structure of my days as I took that time off.
Wow. Now for you, what were some of the hardest parts of the sabbatical?
Uh, you know, a lot of people like the idea of a sabbatical and then are terrified about being alone with themselves,
Hmm.
just spending that much time with themselves. And so that was the best and the hardest part is to really, it allowed me some time and space to start practices of loving myself at a deeper level and allowing myself to be loved more deeply. To be honest, it was very spiritual process. So it was, restorative to my physical body, and it was restorative to, my mind, but even more so, and why I call it a soul sabbatical, it was a deep practice for my soul and my spirit.
Mm. Do you often find yourself overwhelmed by the influx of client calls you receive? Receptionists are expensive, but you can't afford to let your patients go to voicemail. You care for your clients, so you try to phone them back, but more often than not, it's too late. They've gone to another practice. When you partner with Well Received, you capture every opportunity. Your calls are answered by professional medical receptionists 24/7, and they can support you with more than just message taking. They offer new patient intake, after hours service, bilingual services, medical appointment scheduling, medical live chat, and so much more. All this at a fraction of the cost of an in house receptionist. Your patients are Well Received's priority. As a Practice in the Practice listener, you can get an exclusive 50% off your first 2 months of service. Head on over to wellreceived.com/Joe to start growing your practice today. Now, you had said you and your husband run the group together. Did you
Mhm.
guys have any kind of boundaries around him sharing like S hitting the fan
Yeah.
or like gossip at work and I could also see how, in a relationship, there could be also this dynamic of feeling kind of like guilty that he's, running the practice and maybe wanting to have some affirmation of no, like do the sabbatical, but then also
Yeah.
when do I get to do a sabbatical? And like,
Right.
how did that, tell me about that dynamic with you guys?
Well, Joe, let me tell you. So he actually his sabbatical was to hike the Pinhoti, which is a trail from Florida through, Florida and Alabama and Georgia. So he did that after I
Oh,
got back into the office. So he had his own version
awesome.
of the sabbatical. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I remember. So I mentioned that I took a camping trip at the very beginning of my sabbatical, and I remember standing on a beach in Washington and being on the phone with him and he's like, hey, did you get that code for, verification for whatever it was? And I was like, are you kidding me right now? No, I didn't get your code. Like, you're going to have to figure that out. This is not why I'm talking to you right now.
Mhm.
So one of the nice things about that was, just kind of being out there and uh, uh, there, when you're in national parks and stuff, there's very limited cell service. So,
Yeah, I
um,
learned that by living in them, for 10
yes,
months during the pandemic. The very first
yeah,
webinar I tried to do in the Tetons, I
yes.
had my truck, we had Wi-Fi in, and so I was right next to a building that was said to have the strongest Wi-Fi in the Tetons, and then I had my truck as a backup, and literally,
Yeah,
it was the word like, I couldn't do the webinar. it was
exactly,
ridiculous. So I just ended up
exactly.
where I would, when I was in national parks, just totally disappear for,
Yeah,
sometimes 6 to 8 days and then come back and work
yeah,
5 or 6 days
it,
and then
yeah.
yeah,
It's the best. It's a hidden gem. It's a secret. But yeah, so there was just enough service for us to check in, like like uh, personal stuff without having too much time to check in on the business stuff. And then I had a strict boundary with myself. Like I did not step foot near our office during the entire time and the conversations of him coming home at the end of the day, we really had to work through that and negotiate through that, like when you work with your partner anyway, it is you have to have those boundaries in place, otherwise work goes on, you discuss work on into the night and stuff.
yeah,
So but there was those boundaries were even more firm, like, it's
mhm,
not gonna, if there's something really really important for you to talk to me about, then yes, but I can't compromise, um I can't compromise the work that I'm doing on myself
yeah.
by allowing that to pull me in.
I have a one-on-one, consulting client that did something similar, had just a horrendous year in the practice and, a lot of
Hmm.
things hit the fan, and we
Hmm.
worked through a lot of processes and taking things off her plate, and
Yeah.
then, as we started talking, we free a lot of time was freed up, and she still needed to do some of the operations,
Hmm.
but she found that she had all this time, and so we
Yeah.
worked through a plan of creative meandering,
Hmm.
is what we labeled it, and just,
Yeah.
like, literally going back to like what brings you joy,
Yes.
what are you interested in, what have you always wanted to do, is it a 2 or 3 week like pottery class, is it
Yeah.
something creative, is it singing or acting or walking or working out, and
Yeah.
just allowing yourself to try things. I think oftentimes
Mhm.
when we set goals or have resolutions or things like that, we feel bad if we give up on something, but to
Mhm.
me it's that your body's telling you that, going to the gym is not the way you want to work out. Does that mean that you're not a
Uh-huh.
person that wants to work out? No, maybe you'd rather be in nature, or maybe you'd rather
Right.
play pickleball or whatever. Like,
Exactly.
and so that creative meandering, I think, can give so much just life to you, and
Yeah.
sometimes it gives you business ideas, but that's not the point of it.
Right.
On the other side of this, coming back in, you set up these systems where you could, disappear for a month and then not see clients for 3 months. What has sustained that actually made your business stronger by stepping back that much?
Oh, wow. So, my longevity, to be perfectly honest, I mean, you hit on it earlier, like, if I need to take a look at myself to say what's gonna keep me in this for the long haul, because otherwise there is no practice, otherwise there is no Harper therapy. So, that piece, putting putting the personal structure in place, um, knowing the benefits of, you know, having a slower pace for myself and having that creative meandering, um, helps. Yeah, it gives me some time and space, and sometimes business ideas do bubble up from that. But also, it makes me a better partner and a better mom and a better boss and a better therapist.
Mm. What sort of systems that you set up for being gone that much, are, like, really still clicking along that you now don't have to be involved in things that you used to be involved in?
Yeah, I think a lot of just handing over, like, I didn't realize how well, I knew I was an overfunctioner. I didn't realize how much the overfunctioning was playing in the practice. So I have stepped back so much from um, being overly involved in parts of the practice that weren't mine, to that wasn't my work to do. At the front end, at that business retreat, my husband wrote. We worked together on creating a job description for me, because if he's handling most of the admin side of things, then I don't like. I he needs to be able. He needs to do that, and I don't. Not that I was micromanaging, but I felt like in order to be, like a good partner and to be a good, founder of this practice, that I needed to know everything that was going on. And I trust him, and that's where he operates the best. And so just kind of being more hands off with all of that has been a game changer.
Mm. Yeah, I think that, that idea of creating a job description for yourself,
Hmm.
is so important. And, as I've helped people sell their practices or move into almost like a silent owner side of it, sometimes there's some
Uh-huh.
guilt of like,
Yeah.
I'm making money, but I'm not really like working
Yeah.
that much. And it's like, yeah, that's what building a business is.
You're right.
Like,
That's
you
why
know,
you did this.
yeah, you can choose to be an owner operator. You can
Uh-huh.
choose to be an owner operator, clinical director, but then recognize that you're taking on three very distinct roles. One is
Right.
the operations, one as the
Yes.
clinical director, one
Yeah.
as the owner. And
Yeah.
you get to choose. Maybe you just want to be clinical director and you
Right.
want to also be owner and have the operations be somebody else, or, like whatever
Mhm.
configuration you want. And so I think
Yeah.
that what this does is it really allows Yolanda to say, like, what do I actually want out of this practice? What gives me the
Yeah.
joy? And,
Yeah.
maybe even there's skills that you have and you're awesome at, but you just
Yeah.
don't want to do it. The example I often use is that I used to, at the beginning, do all the like cover art for all the social media for every single
Right.
podcast and
Mhm.
all the show notes and all the editing.
Yep.
And every episode that was, 30, 40 minutes long would take me 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
But I'm an artistic person. I love
Yeah.
doing that. I love
Yeah.
design. And it was like part of my kind of ego was wrapped up in it. But
Right.
then when I outsourced that and had a designer do it and a
Yeah.
sound team do it, now today I'm doing 4 podcast episodes in,
Right.
like 3 hours. And that would
Yeah.
have taken days to complete.
Forever.
Um,
Yeah.
and I can just go do the art that I want to do instead of the art that's my
Exactly.
business.
Exactly, and to be honest with you, that this has I always like the involvement in the business and the practice, yes, but I've always had this, like, something else or something bigger or something like just like this creative space, to do things like my TED Talk. And to be honest with you, like the space that I created or that was created through the sabbatical, along with the journal entries that I made for my, like, just the journaling that I did through sabbatical, is what led to the book. And so, I never intended on writing a book, Joe. Like, that
Mhm.
was not part of all of this. But as I was going through my experience and I would share a little bit here and there, it really, I found that it was resonating with people.
Mm.
And I started thinking, I think that there's something to this, because I'm so big on, let's wrap words around the experiences that so many of us are having. Like, these burnout is
Mhm.
real, and we're talking about it more recently, but, like, especially at that time, like, why are we not talking about this?
Yeah.
And a good portion of the book was, translated journal entries, along with guided exercises, and really thoughts about the systems that we operate in that keep helpers and healers more prone to being in these spaces of burnout. But that allowed me to reconnect to myself, to give space for the whatever the next thing, whatever the next calling in my life is.
Yeah. Well, Yolanda, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
I would love for every practitioner to know that it's not only their, like, tuning into your heart and your desire and the things that bring you joy is just as much of an important component of building your practice and the helping and healing work that you do, as the systems, as the trainings, as anything else.
Mm, so good. Yolanda, if people want to get your book, if they want to reach out to you and connect, follow your work, where should we
Yeah.
send them?
Yeah, so you can go to yolandaharper.com. The book is available there. It's available on Amazon and other online retailers. But you can go to yolandaharper.com and connect with me there and sign up for the newsletter. I'm sending out monthly newsletters just to build a community where we are all traveling this wholehearted life together, about how this process still continues for me. And if you head over there, um, to yolandaharper.com/POP, you can have access to a guided meditation around that ideal perfect day and a download so that you can explore that for yourself.
So awesome. Yolanda, thank you so much for the work you're doing and sharing so much about your sabbatical.
Yeah, thank you so much for the conversation, Joe. I really enjoyed it. It's good to see you again.
Yes, agreed. All right, bye. It's interesting. So I have a whole section about slowing down in Thursday is the New Friday. And when you look at the research, our best work, our best ideas, all those things come not when we're stressed out and maxed out. They come when we slow down, and when we're taking a shower, out for a walk, meditating, because our brains aren't all amped up. We're able to just let the brain just rest. And then those ideas that really matter come to the surface. So if you haven't checked out Yolanda's book, make sure you check it out. If you haven't checked out Thursday is the New Friday, those two would be great companions together. Also, Yolanda had mentioned her coach, Kelly, but we didn't say who Kelly is or Kelly's last name. Kelly Higdon is a great friend of mine. She's amazing. Wanted to give a shout out to her. KellyHigdon.com is where you can read about her coaching. I actually sent her a text saying Yolanda gave her a shout out while we were doing this podcast. And she is so proud of you, Yolanda, and all that you've done. And she replied right away and was so happy that you're on the show today. Also, we have some really cool things coming up. We've got a couple of interviews with the Harvard Business Review authors that are joining me in the book that just came out. So if you are in an airport, if you are in a bookstore, HBR has a work-life balance book that was released that I'm being featured in. I wrote an article for Harvard Business Review about boundaries and soft boundaries and hard boundaries and kind of the way to think through that a little bit differently, which is great because that goes right along with what we were talking about with sabbaticals with Yolanda today. So make sure you pick up that book. It's wherever Harvard Business Review books are sold. They're sold in every major bookstore, online. If you're flying this month, for a couple months, it'll be in the airport, which I've always wanted to have a book in the airport, and I can't believe that it happened. So really excited about that. That's some of those other authors that are joining me in that book. We'll be on for a couple episodes, and then on May 9th. Set a reminder to yourself. May 9th is when we kick off our psychedelic assisted therapy series. So far, I've recorded 4 of these episodes, but we've reached out directly to a number of different people, and some of these guests have done some amazing connections that we're trying to get scheduled in time to have it run. But the first one is going to be ecstasy as medicine, how MDMA can help you overcome trauma, anxiety, and depression, and feel more love with Jonathan Robinson. Then after that, we're going to be talking about psilocybin-assisted therapy retreats and training with Catherine Warnock, and then running groups with psilocybin and ketamine with Carrie Haynes, and then Ibogaine PTSD, traumatic brain injury and trauma with Talia Eisenberg. Those are the first 4. We're getting a lot of interest from not just listeners, but from people in this work. Whether or not you plan to introduce this to your clients, get into that kind of work, to me, it's important to be educated. Our clients are going to be asking us about this if they aren't already. A lot of states are decriminalizing plant medicines, and it seems like the FDA is really moving towards, at least according to what Jonathan said during the episode for episode 989, the MDMA is most likely going to be approved by the FDA for therapeutic treatment soon. So really interesting work that it's important for us to learn about, to be educated on, to dig in deep, and to realize this is only the beginning of the conversation. There are so many angles that we can take when we talk about psychedelic assisted therapy. I mean, we can talk about the research side, the practitioner side. We can talk about the gentrification side and how a lot of these sacred medicines come from groups outside of kind of predominant culture here in the U.S. And how do we protect that while also look at progress, and just a lot of things to talk about and think through, and really exciting conversations coming up. And then in early June, we've got our 1,000th episodes. We are doing some planning around that. Hope to have that be a great celebration with you. Our 1,000th episode. That's just insane to me. We couldn't do this show without our sponsors. Well Received is such a great virtual assistant company to cover that front desk. If you miss a call, those people just go through the list. They call the next person. But if you have someone that is a medical receptionist 24/7, you're not going to miss those people. And Well Received has new patient intakes, after-hour services, bilingual services, medical chat, and so much more at the fraction of an in-house receptionist. And now you can actually get 3 months of 50% off instead of 2 months. They raised the stakes. So head on over to wellreceived.com/Joe, and you can get 50% off of your first 3 months today. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.